who have been around for a long time. And we are not necessarily comfortable with everything that's going on right now. It's very different than anything that we've ever seen. It's not the United States of America that we've always expected. And slowly, it has been taken from us. It's just that it's more obvious now, and there are more of us who are aware of what's going on. We were created for such a time as this. And we are very, very fortunate to be in the presence of someone who's extraordinarily creative, very courageous, and all that courage is feeling the fear and doing it anyway. So there are a lot of clerk and recorders or clerks or election clerks all across the United States. And they were all chosen for such a time as this, just like we were. The difference is that here in Elbert County, we have the protection of someone, a man with great integrity, who has a very skilled team, who has integrity, and they're willing to take the shots because they're willing to stand up. So tonight, you're going to have an opportunity to hear some of the facts and figures, and that'll be for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have a 30-minute period of time where you can ask questions. You can ask questions if you're just here in the audience. You can also ask questions if you're part of the media. We want to make sure that as many questions as possible are asked. So we're going to welcome the main event. I'm like the side dish, maybe dessert. And we're going to, we did have some rocky road because it has been a rocky road. So now you've gotten to walk that journey with us. But you know what? When you're a person of integrity, it's not usually easy. When you stand up for what's right, it's generally not easy. And we're so blessed to see you all here tonight, because I know that most of you are here because you are truly devoted to election integrity in every possible way. And you have done many things to make sure that we maintain election integrity here in Elbert County. So it is my great privilege, and thank you for sitting on the bleachers back here. It is my great privilege to introduce our presenter tonight, Mr. Dallas Schroeder.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. That means a lot. As Dee said, this evening is an evening for anybody that thinks election integrity is important, for anybody who thinks election transparency is important. Tonight isn't intended to be a partisan event. It's not intended to go and stray into the political realm. It's intended just to talk about elections and transparency and openness, so everybody can be assured that the outcomes that we have on election night are the true, fair, and accurate outcomes. So if you're here tonight and you have a preconceived notion of what you might hear or what you might think, if you came here already thinking you knew everything, I'm just going to ask you to throw it all out. Just clean everything out of your mind. We'll have a blank slate. And at the end of the night, you can make your decisions on what goes on in Colorado elections and Elbert County elections and see how much confidence you have in them. You know, in life, there's times that you encounter a big decision, right? You know that there's going to be a big decision that you have coming up, and it's going to be one that affects you for the rest of your life. So the first one for me was March 17th, 1984. I always remember that date. That was the day that I made the decision I was going to give my life to Christ. I accepted him as my Lord and Savior and was baptized that day. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm perfect. I've made mistakes. I still make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes in the future. But what it does mean, it means that I am forgiven. Amen. And that is a decision that I have no regrets over. Another big decision that I had, and that all of you probably have had or will have, is a decision on who you're going to marry. That's one that's going to affect you the rest of your life, right? I see a few chuckles here. Everybody agrees with that. Well, on June 1st, 1992 was the day that I married my bride here, Rebecca. And we just celebrated 30 years together this past June. I could not have a more perfect supporter, encourager, helper in my life. And that's not only just over the last 18 months, but that's been over 30 years. So that was another big decision. And you know what? I have no regrets over that one either. Well, I had another big decision that happened last summer. And that question was to image or not to image. That was the question. Okay, so those of you who know me know that's a little bit of it's a laugh line. Now, we're talking about a serious topic today in election integrity and transparency, but I got a few little things in there, so it's okay to laugh. We'll be good with that too. But it's important. So we had a decision. I had a decision to make last summer. And to do so had consequences, just like every big decision that we have. I knew that if I went ahead with the decision of imaging, I'd have disagreements and I would be disparaged by other election colleagues throughout the state and the country. And that's happened. I knew I would be the receiver of some wrath from the Secretary of State's office. That's happened. I knew there was a potential for criminal investigation, even though there was nothing criminal about anything that I did. That doesn't mean that they can't bring charges. And I knew that what we did was right. It was the right thing to do. But yet I know when people stand up and for the truth, sometimes they get punished for that. And I was prepared to do that. Another thing I went through my mind was potential threats against me or my family. And that's no small thing to think about. And thankfully to some of the press releases that the secretaries put out, I've received some very colorful emails and colorful voice messages. One a few months ago, the guy mentioned that he'd like to come punch me in the nose. And that particular day, I would have liked to have seen him. It was just one of those days. But that happens. And that was one of those things, those possible consequences. And so for many people, when they face consequences like that, they find that it's easier, the easier path is to go along to get along. But you know what? That was just something I could not do. Because if I didn't do the image, it also had consequences. It would mean I would turn my back on my search for truth and transparency. It means for the rest of my life, I'd have to look at my kids and grandkids and say I had an opportunity to do something and I didn't do it. But more importantly, it means I would have to look myself in the mirror for the rest of my life, knowing I had an opportunity to do something and didn't do it. So I'm proud to say that on August 26th of last year, I made the decision that Elbert County elections would make forensic images of the Elbert County voting system. We made images of all our hard drives. We have 2 ICC computers. Those are the computers where the scanning takes place. We have 2 of those. We made the forensic images on those hard drives. Our adjudication computer and our election management server, which, by the way, had 2 hard drives in it. And they had different levels of data on each of the drives. 5 drives we made that night. And I'll tell you what led to that decision to make those It's what the rest of the story is for tonight. I'm going to lead you up to the things that came across my desk and across my computer that made me make that decision that we had to make those drives. And after that, I will talk to you about what has happened since August up through today. My focus on my talk tonight will be strictly on the drives. As many of you know, we've had a few other disagreements with the Secretary of State's office over the past year, and perhaps some of those will be addressed later at the question time. But my presentation tonight will be strictly on the drives and what happened. Our story starts in November of 2020, the presidential election. For Elbert County elections, that election went off without a hitch. Now, I know us in the election world have a different definition of what a good election is. For us, we got everything perfectly balanced, everything worked out. We're not so much worried about the outcome when we're have our elections hats on. And that election for Elbert County was perfect. It was perfectly balanced. We had the exact number of ballots scanned of what we received. Everything was just perfect as far as the election side with that election. But as you know, there was noise that started fairly quickly and continued to amplify throughout the country that maybe there was issues with that election. And quite frankly, I was just concerned about us. We were good, right? Whatever those other states do, whatever's going on over there, I don't know their rules, I don't know their regulations. Would I like to have the opportunity to sit down with some of those election officials and talk to them and ask questions about things that I've heard that went on in those other states? Absolutely. But that's not possible, it's not feasible. And so really all I could focus on is Elbert County, and what we were doing in Elbert County was working. It seemed like everything was going along smoothly, and so I was pleased. But as that noise continued to grow into December and into January of 2021, I encountered something at the Colorado County Clerks Association meeting, and it's the first time that made me go, something doesn't ring true here. And that was, we had a gentleman that presented, and of course he presented remotely because of COVID, but a gentleman by the name of Matt Masterson. Worked with DHS, Department of Homeland Security, worked with the EAC, the Elections Federal Authority. We had him just last week at the association as well, and he's currently working with Microsoft and Google on stuff online. And what he said to us that January of 21, I was sitting with Rhonda Braun, my elections manager. You all know her. She does a great job. We were sitting there listening to Matt make his presentation. And in the middle of his presentation, he says, well, we're going to start doing some aggressive work against this dis, and val information. And he said, we're going to use the same algorithms to combat dis, and malinformation in elections as we have in COVID. And he's talking specifically about online, the social media platforms, how they were using algorithms to try and suppress what they considered to be dis, and malinformation against COVID. They were going to start using those same algorithms to suppress anything that they didn't agree with on the election side. Now, there's a reason that the First Amendment says that we have freedom of speech, and that extends to social media platforms. And when we have government or big tech or whoever that are using algorithms to keep us from expressing our opinions because they think that it's dis, and malinformation, I have a problem with it. It doesn't make sense to me. They shouldn't do that. If they can't compete in the marketplace of ideas, then they lose, right? They lose. And so when Matt made that statement, Rhonda and I looked at each other and were like, did you just hear what I heard? That they're going to try and suppress people's opinions on what happened with the election, just like they have with COVID? So that was the first time that I really raised a question in my mind. Now, through the end of the winter and into the spring, we had lots of conversations in the elections department. We have a policy in Elbert County elections that no matter who you are, what your political affiliation is, conservative, liberal, whoever you are, if you come in and you have questions about elections and you want to sit down and have a conversation and we can have respectful disagreements, we're good with that. and we will sit and talk to you for as long as it takes. And we have people on both sides of the aisle come in during that spring with questions. What's going on? What are we doing? What's Elbert County doing? What do you think about's going on in these different places? All we could answer is what was going on in Colorado and what we had. But it was obvious that the questions over election integrity and transparency were not going away. So finally, I made the decision. We would do a hand count of the presidential election with the goal of finding what the truth was. Good, bad, ugly, indifferent, we didn't care. What we were looking for was finding the truth. Finding the truth has always been what we're seeking. During that recount, we found 3 discrepancies. We could attribute them all to voter error. So the ballots that were presented to the machines, our Dominion system, counted correctly. You'd think that maybe would put everything to rest. We had people on this side saying, yay, Elbert County did a hand count. And we had people on this side saying, yay, Elbert County did a hand count. So it's kind of funny that everybody was happy we did a hand count, but yet no one's too excited about doing a hand count today. Also in May, we were scheduled for our trusted build. Our upgrade was to take place at the end of May. Now, the trusted build, for those of you that don't know, is when the state comes in every couple years and they completely wipe our machines. All those computers that I talked about, the hard drives we made, the state comes in, they completely wipe those hard drives and reinstall the new system on those drives. And they call it a trusted build. And they have the golden image that they bring out and they put it in there. Well, part of what they had put in place, the email that they sent us on the date that we had scheduled, was that we would have a limited number of people in the room and that everybody in the room had to wear masks and gloves because of COVID. Well, this is just last May, okay? So I had made a promise to my staff that we weren't going to mask up. We are fortunate enough to have a building that, if necessary, we can keep the public out and still do our business through the drive-through. And I had made a promise to my staff that we weren't going to make them to do that. They were certainly welcome to. We had some that did for a while, but with no qualms. But I certainly wasn't going to make it a requirement. And so when we saw that, I saw that on the requirement that the Secretary of State's office was coming to my house to put restrictions on my people. I pushed back, and I said, no, we're not going to do it. I don't care if your people come in hazmat suits. That's fine. But our people will be free-flowing. And they didn't necessarily agree with that. And so we went back and forth a few times, and we ended up postponing the trusted build. Hopefully they had said to a time when maybe we wouldn't have those restrictions anymore. Now, the Secretary is convinced that this was all part of the conspiracy, and I was just using COVID as an excuse to postpone it. But in all reality, if they'd have showed up at the end of the May, I didn't have enough information, I didn't know enough to say no. We would have gone ahead with the trusted build. But it's kind of funny listening and reading some of their writings. They're sure that there was a huge conspiracy at that point. But that's how adamant I was about our not making my ladies succumb to their COVID restrictions. So over the summer, more questions popped up. And one of the questions that popped up was whether or not ProV&V, who was a lab that was supposed to certify the Dominion system that we used, 5.11, whether they were certified by the AEC to be able to do that certification. And their name is ProV&V. And one of the first documents that I had that came up, and then we'll start using some of it on the screen here. Now, anything that you see circled in red, the next slide is going to be bigger so we can read it. But I just want you to see the whole document there. This is the certificate of accreditation for ProV&V. They're out of Huntsville, Alabama, to be a VSTL certified to look at election software and to certify it. If you look where it was circled there, it has an effective date. Effective date through February 24th of 2017. Now, how many people think that means that's when it expires? Okay. Well, that kind of makes sense, but that's kind of the crux of our argument here. They did go through accreditation. They did get accredited in February of 21. They have a new accreditation certificate, and this one has a little bit different. Instead of having an expiration date, it says the original accreditation is issued on 2/24/15, and it remains effective until revoked by a vote of the EAC pursuant to U.S. Code 52-109-1090-71. I like how they changed how that certification was. So that's where it's at now. And they did go through the process, and they were certified in February, and I'll show you the documentation on that. We just have a hole in the middle. So this picture right here is from the EAC website, and it talks about all the different stations, the different accreditations that they needed to go through to get done. So if you look, the bottom line there was in 2012 when they were going through their initial time of certification, and they have a recommendation letter, conditions of practices, and so forth. Then you see it jumps, a certificate 224, when we see the certificate that expired 2 years later in February of 17. The next thing we have on there is a renewal memo from January of 21. Okay. This is still on the EAC website today. Okay. I pulled this picture off yesterday. So there was questions about whether or not Pro V&V was a certified agency when they certified Dominion System 5.11. We received a memo. We get lots of memos. This one was from the EAC, and you'll notice that there's no date on it, and there's no signature on it. It's just a memo that was sent to us. I want to point out two different things that are on there along with this question, because there were questions that were popping up to the state and other places on whether or not they were truly certified. And the one paragraph starts out with, due to administrative error during 2017 and 2019, the EAC did not issue an updated certificate, causing confusion with some people concerning the good status. You think? That memo goes on at the bottom, and it says Pro V&V was accredited by the EAC on February 24th, 2015, and SLI compliance, which is here in Colorado, was accredited by EAC on February 28th, 2007. Federal law provides the EAC accreditation of a voting system test laboratory cannot be revoked unless the EAC commissioners vote to revoke the accreditation. And this has been their argument every time this is brought up. It's never been revoked. It's never been revoked. It's never been revoked. We're not talking about a revocation. We're talking about an expiration. It's two different things. So the next time y'all get pulled over by the law enforcement, I know none of you ever would, and you have that expired driver's license because you didn't go get it renewed, just try that with that law enforcement. Well, it's never been revoked, right? Yeah, well, it's still expired. It still doesn't work. There's still something that had to take place. So all these things are rolling around my head. It's starting to create questions about where we are with the system. Then this last letter that we came across kind of put me over the top. It just kind of makes me shake my head. It comes from a guy that we actually know, Jerome Lovato. And he sent this letter out. He was with the Election Assistance EAC. And here's what his letter says. And that one was dated. If you look, it was have a date on it of January of 2021. Pro V&V has completed all requirements to remain in good standing with the EAC's testing and certification program per Section 3.8 of the Voting System Test Laboratory Manual, version 2.0. And he quotes it. Expiration and renewal of accreditation. A grant of accreditation is valid for a period not to exceed 2 years. Follows right along with what the certificate said. A VSTL's accreditation expires on the date, the annotated on the certificate of accreditation. And then the footnote at the bottom is what really made me scratch my head. Due to the outstanding circumstances posed by COVID-19, The renewal process for EAC laboratories has been delayed for an extended period. While this process continues, ProV&V retains its EAC VSTL accreditation. Now, I don't know about you all, but I didn't know anything about COVID in 2017. Right? How can we go back and blame not getting certified in 2017 on COVID? I don't know. Another one of those things that made me scratch my head and took me farther along, saying something just isn't making sense here. Another one of the questions that came up during that summer, we know that we have commercial off-the-shelf products for all of our systems. And we have some confusion exactly when we became aware of that, what that meant. But what that means is that there are wireless devices in every single one of our equipment. All of our computers, all of our touch screens, all of that equipment has wireless devices embedded in it. And that summer it became, last summer, more and more people were becoming aware of that and actually was being stated out in the open. And that made me scratch my head because we'd always been told that these machines were not connected to the internet. And so we went through it, and it just started creating more questions for me, right? How we have this system. Now, some of you probably are more technologically aware than I am. But I've been told that if there's a wireless device in the system, even if it's turned off, that doesn't mean it can't be turned back on, right? With the right way to do it. So that became a problem for me, because how am I supposed to know if anybody has used that wireless device to access our system? The only way I can do it is through a forensic image of the drives to see if there's been what activity has happened on that backside. So that became a real question for me on these wireless devices in the system. Incidentally, before last election, 2021, that was the first time we had any guidance from the state to even check and make sure and verify that our system wasn't connected. You understand that? How many years have we gone with this system? Last fall was the first time that they told us to even check it. The funny part is that for the primary election, they said we should check it multiple times. Yeah, right? It's a snapshot over a period of time. What is that going to tell us? I don't know. But that was interesting that they finally have admitted and said we need to start checking that. So that put a lot of questions in my mind as well, as far as what capabilities are within our system. Thirdly, we had a paper put out by the U.S. Department of Justice. It was published on July 28th, 2021, and it has some interesting things to say as well. And we have those available if anybody wants a copy of the whole blue paper, several pages long, but I've just extracted what's important here. So one of the sentences says, the materials covered by Section 301 extend beyond papers to include other records. Jurisdictions must therefore also retain and preserve records created in digital or electronic form. It's a must. It's not if you want to, it's a must. Also in that document, it says it provides that, quote, all documents and records that may be relevant to the detection or prosecution of federal civil rights or election crimes must be maintained if the documents or records were generated in connection with an election that included one or more federal candidates. And lastly, this is because the document retention requirements of this federal law place the retention and safekeeping duties squarely on the shoulders of election officials. This is the U.S. Justice Department paper. So my question to you is, with all this information, I put together and had a lot of help and people supplying information. With all that information, I made the decision that we needed to copy the drives of the Elbert County system. Now, you know in what I know, what choice did I have? You follow the law or you don't follow the law. Do you know what? Making a forensic copy is not unusual. Even our Dominion contract calls for it. In subsection in our contract, under prohibited acts, it says the licensee shall not, without prior written permission of the licensor, transfer a copy to any other storage device or hardware or otherwise copy the software in whole or part except for purposes of a system backup. CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Administration, orders it for other government agencies. This is taken from an Emergency Directive 2101 and to mitigate the SolarWinds Orion code compromise. There was a hack within the system on this, and CISA, which falls under Department of Homeland Security, was given some orders. In response to a known reasonably suspected information security threat, vulnerability, or incident that represents a substantial threat to the information, the agency issues an emergency declaration that all agencies conduct a forensically image their system, memory, and host operating systems when that occurred. It was ordered from CISA to these agencies to do. They're aware of what a forensic image is and what it does. I want to go back to this question on vulnerability here. Fairly recently, the director of the County Clerks Association during the spring session sent a letter to all of the legislatures in Denver. We have some in the building today. Appreciate you guys, appreciate your work. In that, the director admitted there were vulnerabilities within the system that they're working to take care of. Just a very few short weeks ago, before the Halderman report came out, Professor Halderman out of Michigan had a report on the vulnerabilities of voting machines. They're not the same exact type that we use here in Colorado, but it's a vulnerability within a voting system. We were on a call with the Secretary of State's office, and they said, you know what, that's one of the reasons why we do the trusted build, is that we take care of all those vulnerabilities, and we're pretty sure that whatever comes out in the Halderman report, we've already taken care of in the trusted build. Hey, no one had seen the Halderman report yet. How they were sure that they took care of all the vulnerabilities, I don't know. But that's what we were told. But here in the U.S. Code, it talks about if there are vulnerabilities, that they have the ability to have a forensic image made. The EAC also defines, this is the copy of the EAC decision on request and interpretation of 2009-4, talking about a request for interpretation of audit logs. Audit logs is what we're talking about, what we were after with the making the image of the drives. And I won't read all this, you can read it if you want to, but it says the purpose of the numerous audit log requirements, from ballot creation through the accumulation of the election's official results, it is necessary for the system or systems to record and retain a log of all, I didn't make that bolder, they did it, all significant events. For the purposes of a voting system, audit log requirement event is defined as the following. It talks about the impact upon election data, the management or integrity of the voting system or configuration, setup and delivery, all the things of what we need to take a log for. And it closes by saying, examples of significant events include booting up and shutting down of a system, logging into and signing off a system, failed attempts at logging into the system. I think those are all important things that we should know if those were happening to our system. Yeah. And with the election time we have, all we know, we don't have access to that back door. And that's what we're looking at for the drives. Dee's already telling me I got to stop, and I got 15 pages left. So how did we do it? Well, we wanted to follow the law. We wanted to make sure that we did it right. It would be above reproach. So we needed to maintain chain of custody, which we did. We made the images of all 5 hard drives. We had nothing to hide. We did it under surveillance. And perhaps you've seen the pictures of me looking like a Sasquatch walking around, that they must have combed through that video hours to find that one picture where I looked like a Sasquatch walking. But they found it. But we did it under surveillance. We had nothing to hide. We did it right. Most of the time it was Ron and myself in the room, but we did have other authorized staff that was present for a short period of time. And at the time we did that, there was no prohibition to doing that. Later on there was. She made a rule. The question became, who was it given to? It was given to my attorneys. under the confidentiality attorney-client privilege, and they have both signed affidavits saying nothing happened to those drives while they were in their possession. In November of 2021, I joined a lawsuit against the Secretary of State's office. In the course of that preliminary information, I disclosed that Elbert County had made images to the hard drives, seeking the courts to order an evaluation of those drives. Part of that lawsuit included figuring out whether or not Pro V&V was actually certified, not using a federally accredited lab to certify our system. The deletion of election records through trusted build. Some of the election rules prohibiting outside audits, and SOS making voter registration changes in SCORE, which is against state law. Well, we got their attention. On January 24th, 2022, the SOS put out a press release. And the press release stated, my office became, this is Jenna speaking, Ms. Griswold, my office became aware of a potential breach in election security protocols in Elbert County. It makes it sound like she's got some super sleuths running around checking on everybody and making sure that what's going on. We told them. It wasn't a secret. They became aware because we told them. But that's what the press release said, okay? How the spin was. In addition to that, the press release, Rhonda signs up to get their press releases. The press release was sent out at 12:32 p.m. And when you look at this, they notified me at 12:36 p.m. The press knew what was going on before I did. And we have experienced that many times over the last few months. The Secretary of State's office will notify through a press release before we are even notified of what action they're taking against us. But when she put out the election order, she changed the story a little bit. It wasn't that they were super sleuths finding it out, but they actually stated what happened. That the Department of State was made aware of an affidavit signed by Elbert County Clerk Recorder Alice Schroeder. A little bit different, isn't it? A little bit different. Well, I didn't comply with all their election orders, which included turning over the drives. We tried to compromise and say you could come look at one drive, we'll keep one hidden, you can look at that one, make sure that we told you we haven't been into it, you can verify that, and then we'll swap out, but we're not putting them both at the same place at the same time. We tried a lot of different ways to make it work. She was adamant that she wanted the drives, and so she sued us. Now, before the court date, I sent a letter to the Secretary of State's office. Christopher Beal is the Deputy Secretary of State. They made a new election rule. This Secretary of State likes to make a lot of rules. We have new emergency rules happening all the time. And one of the emergency rules, I put it in my letter, was 20.6.3. A county clerk may not create, permit, or any person to create or disclose to any person an image of the hard drives of any voting system component without the express written approval by and in coordination with the Department of State. So what I took this to mean is what we did in August was okay. There was no rule then, right? To me, it kind of it worked to our favor. But it also meant to me that we had an opportunity. And so I wrote a letter to Chris Beal in this last one and said, Elbert County would really like to make a forensic image of our drives. And in the letter, I said coordinating with Elbert County would benefit to the Secretary of State in two ways. One, we would be able to prove certain allegations false and maintaining the Department of State's assertion that Colorado elections are truly the gold standard and that Colorado citizens can have complete confidence in. And I said the second main thing would help. It will further show the citizens of Colorado that our elections have complete transparency and security protocols within the Dominion system. Well, they pretended like they didn't know what I was asking for, and so they sent a reply back, and so then I had to send another clarification of what I was asking for. And with that one, I put a plan. My plan would be to preservation of these records would make 2 copies. One would stay at my office, the other would be stored at a separate location under my control for the preservation of data in case of flood, fire, some other act of God, or burglary. I don't know. It is my understanding that this is a standard practice for sensitive information, both in the public and private arenas. I also believe the SCORE system backup is in a separate location also. And you can imagine that our request for a forensic image of the Elbert County voting system as it exists today they said we must deny that request for reasons outlined above. Now, they didn't put it in big, bold red letters. That was me. They wanted to, but they didn't. Well, from there, then we had our court case. And many of you attended that court case, and I am forever grateful for that. It's great to have a support like that. That court case didn't turn out exactly like we wanted it. We had an hour-long hearing. At the end of the hearing, the judge says, we'll figure out what we're going to do. 3 hours later, he had a several-page opinion paper that was released. He's an incredibly fast writer. That's all I've got to say. Now, if you remember back when I said when we started to do this, we were going to follow the law and order. We were going to do things the right way. And so we did that. On May 4th, my attorney and myself went to the AG's office and turned those over to Jenna's Griswold's attorneys. Now, the interesting thing about that, she maintained throughout the time that these unauthorized individuals that I'd given these drives to shouldn't have had those, but they were my attorneys, protected by attorney-client privilege. Who did she have me to turn them over to? Her attorney. I find a little irony in that. But anyway, that's what happened. We've had several people ask us, why'd you turn them over? You should have kept them. You should have let them be examined. But our goal was to follow the law. And that means sometimes things happen that we don't necessarily like or don't necessarily agree. Some of you have heard me talk about how Rush Limbaugh really shaped a lot how I think and how I work. And we miss him greatly during this time. Sometimes I still catch myself trying to turn the radio on at noon, and it's just not there. But it's so crystal clear in my mind. When the first assault weapons ban took place under President Clinton, there was a lot of people that called in to Rush's show, and they were upset, and they were ready to do whatever it could to make sure they could still maintain their Second Amendment rights. And Rush maintained calm through all that. And he argued with the people that were in his own audience. He says, no, we have got to be the people who are of law and order, who will follow the laws. Because if we don't, we will be a country that descends into chaos. And that made such an impression on me that I knew that was something I had to follow as well. We will follow the law. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't fight like crazy if we see something wrong with the law, right? We can do everything we can in our country right now to get the right people elected to change the laws of what we want. But we need to be people who follow the law. If we don't, if we are not, then we're no different than the BLM rioters, the Antifa rioters, or the leaker of the Roe versus Wade decision. And that is not a way that we should act. It's not a partisan issue, not a political issue. It should be the goal of every American, and the law has to be applied equally, fairly, and without political bias. There is a reason that Lady Justice has a blindfold. Well, on our drives front with our images, things kind of slowed down after the court case. We were busy. We administered the Park and Rec election. We did that as well. We did a hand count with it and verified that the machine counted every ballot that went through there. The Dominion system counted every ballot correctly that went through there. And then we were on to the primary season. We were busy. Secretary of State's office was busy, and so it kind of slowed down. But I had the opportunity. Things got a little bit quiet, and I was able to write a letter once again to Mr. Beale, the Deputy Secretary of State, on July 27th, asking for two things, and I had reasons for that. One of them was that I am still the chief custodian of all election records in Elbert County. That includes the drives that are in the possession of the AG's office or Secretary of State's office or whoever has them right now. I am the chief custodian of that. And as such, I informed the Secretary of State's office that Elbert County would like to retain those drives beyond the 22-month federal requirement and beyond the 25-month state requirement, Since these drives are now under your direction and control, I assume you will take the proper action and ensure these drives are maintained and preserved in a safe environment. Second thing that was in my letter, talked way back, remember the blue paper the U.S. Justice Department put out? Well, there's another section in there, and it allows for administrative procedures to be in place, giving election officers ultimate management authority on the retention and security of records, including the right to physically access such records. Went on to say this responsibility is enumerated in U.S. Code 52-20701 and CRS 17802, and I wish to verify that the drives are still in good condition, have not been tampered with, and to record what security protocol was implemented if inspections of the drives had taken place. And I requested for this to take place in the next 2 weeks. Guess what I heard back from them? Nothing. So I guess we'll be getting another letter together. So I feel we have that responsibility. I want to thank a lot of people for tonight. Election staff has done great. They don't want to be named by names, but they've been incredibly dedicated over the last 18 months. They fielded a lot of phone calls they shouldn't have had to field because of my actions, and I'm grateful for the work that they do. Rhonda has been by. Yep. Rhonda's been by my side the whole way, working with me, talking with me. We're a great team, and sometimes I have to tell her that's not what we're going to do, and that works out well too. But she's been a great partner in this adventure. Elbert County, I want to thank you. You all have been tremendously supportive of us. When I see people in Walmart and Safeway and in the county building, and they come up and shake my hand and say thank you for what you're doing, I really appreciate it. It keeps us going, and it means more than you know. For my church family, many of you are here. For the extended church people throughout the county, I've lost count of the number of people who said they're praying for us, even just this afternoon, saying it, and I appreciate it. It makes a difference, and it keeps it going. I want to recognize my family. They're here tonight. They've been tremendously supportive, and it's not always easy to hear or see bad things written about their dad, but they've hung in there. Truth and transparency must be present in our elections. Has to be present in our election. A recent poll of 40% shows 40% of Americans now question the outcome of our elections. The only way to bring confidence back is through truth and transparency. If Jenna Griswold is interested in fair and free elections, as she says every time she opens her mouth, she will work with the Elbert County elections using IT experts supplied by us and the SOS to evaluate our drives and put the questions and suspicions to bed. Elbert County elections can be the best thing that ever happened to Colorado elections. If there is nothing to hide, and Colorado is the gold standard, then I challenge Ms. Griswold to use our images and prove it.
Well, I trust that you all have a much better understanding of why we are in the place that we are right now. And I think it's important that we remember that all of us in the United States, I don't care what color you think you are, we all bleed the same. And when we don't have enough people like Dallas to stand up to protect the fabric of how this country was formed, we're in a lot of trouble. So you've gotten to see what courage looks like, and you know it's not an easy road. A lot of you are even closer and spend more time with Dallas than I do. So I just challenge you to do your part and spread the truth, even when people don't want to hear it. There are a lot of people out there who truly believe they're doing the right thing as a journalist. And they're deceived. And they don't know how they're going to provide for their families if they start telling the truth. So my heart goes out to those individuals. But this is what courage looks like. We're going to take a very brief break. It's almost 7:30. Please be back in the room if you need to do a liquid exchange. Please come back to the room. We will be taking questions afterwards. Rhonda will be here in the front. If you have a question, please get in line in the middle of the room. And we will be taking questions starting at 7:33. Thank you.
Liquid exchange.
thank you. All right, if you can please take your seats again. Please take your seats. If you need a bottle of water, we still have water in the back. Can you turn me up?
And so I had posted this on the Elbert County Citizens page, not knowing that she was an admin. And then I read this article about her, and then she kicked me off posting
Yeah.
this. And she immediately,
All right, if everyone can please take your seats, that would be appreciated. All right, so the way this is going to work. The way this is going to work is we are asking for questions. The person who gets to stand on the soapbox tonight is Dallas. So if you have a long and beautifully put together statement, we would prefer that you hold that because it's already after 7:30. So we're going to start with questions. Please introduce yourself and then state your question.
Tom Peterson from Elizabeth. Dallas, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for all that you and your office does. The media and Secretary of State are very quick to criticize Elbert County. And recently at the primary election, you were criticized once again for the 37 uncounted ballots. Could you comment on that, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. We set high standards for ourselves in the Elbert County Elections Department. There's many election judges here. I see you out here. And you know that in our initial talks, what we talk about is our ultimate goal is to count every ballot, count it accurately. Everyone that's supposed to be counted should be counted. And that's a high goal. We've had several years where we've been 100% right on. This year, as we were preparing for the recount, we found a box that had not been opened. It had been received through the post office prior to Election Day. And inside that box, when we opened it, we found about 225 undeliverable ballots and 37 live ballots. And we were completely distraught. It was a bad, bad day. Some of us couldn't even eat lunch because it was bothering us so much. In the spirit of transparency, even if it's bad news, we immediately went to work. We sat down. We figured out what happened, how that got shoved under the table and kind of got around the corner and not found by everybody. It was an oversight by the judges that were working in the room, by our staff, and ultimately it falls on my shoulders as the clerk and recorder of something that we missed. So we put together a remediation plan. We notified the Secretary of State's office that we had an incident, and the same day. We didn't wait. We didn't try and cover it up. We said, we got a problem, and we need help fixing it because these 37 ballots are important. Every one of those ballots need to be counted. And to the Secretary of State's office credit, they worked great with us. And we were able to, because the primary or the recount was still going on for the Secretary of State's office, everything hadn't been completely shut down yet. So we were able to talk to the party chairs, get the judges in, the canvass board in, and get those 37 ballots counted. And so we were so relieved and so grateful that we were able to do that because every ballot truly is important. When we notified the party chairs, they were understandable. The Democratic Party chair, he told us, you guys are doing everything what's right. You're making the right decisions. Appreciate you for letting us know. Carry on. Same thing on the Republican side. And so openness and transparency, even when things aren't necessarily good news, is an important thing to do. And that's what we did. But we did get those 37 ballots counted. They are in our final tally, and those people did get vote credit.
And was there a change at all in the...
Well, obviously all the margins were all big enough that didn't change anything, just changed the numbers. But it was still important that we had every single one of those votes count because every one is precious.
All right, thank you. Next question, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jimmy Alexander. Dallas, I had spoken previously with you, and I want to thank you for all that you're doing to stand up for freedom in America. I found some things in the Constitution. I'm not going to take a long time to ask this, but it's about a two-pronged question, okay? I found that in a lawsuit that took place between Halen and Gisler in 2014, the State Court of Appeals found this, that under this section, the Secretary of State has the authority to promulgate rules necessary to ensure the proper administration of elections. But the Secretary lacks authority to promulgate rules that conflict with statutory provisions. I looked up all the statutory provisions, and I spent quite a lot of time looking up the codes and everything in the state, looking at the state constitution. Two of the things that I found that were absolutely sure is that there are only two types of individuals that are allowed to be at the polling place at any given point in time. One are poll watchers, who are appointed by their candidates or those who have issues on the ballot. The other one is election judges. I checked everywhere through the Constitution. I searched it diligently, and I found out that the state Constitution makes absolutely no provision, nor do any of the statutory provisions that the Secretary of State has put out, makes no provisions for any individual from the Secretary of State being present when any of the elections are taking place. That took place. Pardon me? Can you say the question? Yes, I'm going to say the question now. The question is, I want to know what you think ought to be done. I understand there was a bill that was sent by the Secretary of State for the presence of one of their individuals, but the state constitution calls that coercion, and it's very clear that they violated the state law in having anyone present at any election that took place in any county in the state of Colorado. So I'd like you to address that, please.
You're talking about our guests during the primary? Yes. Secretary Griswold assigned us a supervisor during the primary. I'm not sure about your provisions, Jimmy, and I'd have to do some more research to fully answer that. But she did send a supervisor down, contrary to what had been put out into social media world and everywhere else. She didn't come here and take over the election. She was here just to observe. I still maintain full authority, full decision-making authority. She was just here, as the order said, to observe my decisions, my decision-making process. Now, how she was going to figure out inside my head what my decision-making process was, I'm not sure, but that's what the rule said. Ms. Coburn, we've known for a long time, and when I knew that she was the one that was going to come down and look, my stress level reduced. I knew she wasn't going to be here trying to nitpick and find problems. But yes.
What she found?
What she found, probably. Interesting about that.
Quick summary.
We have not still received from the Secretary of State's office the official report from Ms. Coburn. Still waiting on that. But someone
Ash in America
got an open records request. Who can remain nameless, but I think they're in the room. This was the summary. Given that the county observes processes are substantially compliant with applicable laws and rules, and given that Elbert County successfully conducted operations through Election Day during the 2022 primary election, it is my opinion that daily monitoring and oversight is no longer necessary. The county appears well equipped to conduct future elections with current staff, facilities, and resources. Therefore, it is my recommendation that Secretary terminate Election Order 2022-09 dated June 9th this time. That was the summary from our observer.
Can you please just mention how much we were billed for that?
Afraid to say, Elbert County citizens, our bill's just around $13,000 for that little excursion. But just pending.
Yeah,
and we don't have, well, anyway, I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to...
Okay, next question, please.
Too far.
I answered my first question. My name is Stacy Chambers. I'm new to Elizabeth, but I've been in the area, Douglas County. I'm a native of Colorado, so
Welcome.
it's nice to be here. I have many questions, but one, since that one was answered, is there any efforts by Elbert County or in your office, and what do we need to do to get rid of the machines and go back to hand ballots?
So we have that question a lot, that want to get rid of the Dominion machines, want to get rid of all machines. And I understand that sentiment. There's a lot of questions that go along with that, of where it at. But if we were able to find a system that did not have wireless capabilities, that we were able to look at the codes and look at the back doors and all that, the machines that do count correctly. We've proven it on many accounts. But there's no reason that we can't cross-check, right? We can't cross-check versus a hand count to what the machines are done. And that's what we've done before we started doing hand counts. We went a step further than what the normal RLA process was, where we might only have 30 or 40 ballots to test, to assure that the election outcome was correct. So we started having our election judges pull 500 ballots randomly. And so with our audit, it's a top-down. It comes from the state down to us, telling us what ballots to look at. We started doing a bottom-up. And so we would have our canvass board pull 500 ballots at random. State knew nothing about which ones we were going to pull. And then we could pull that actual ballot, look at the ballot image, the cast vote record that shows how that ballot was counted, and verify it that way. And putting those two together makes a very powerful system for it. When we do our hand counts, invariably when we are doing the hand counting, it's our human error when we go through the hand count. And if we didn't have the backup on the Dominion system where Rhonda can go in and see that exact batch to see where the problem was and match it up and figure out if there was a problem or not, it'd be much more difficult to do. So marrying the two different methods, to me, makes the most sense. But I understand the sentiment. We got to make sure that the Dominion system or any system is secure first.
Hi, Lisa Lewis, Elizabeth. Can you remind us of the name of the judge that ruled so quickly in 3 hours to have you turn over the copies that you made to Jenna Griswold's attorneys? And do we have the ability to unaffirm them in November?
Good question.
Kramer, good job. I couldn't remember what his name was. Judge Kramer, district judge here in Elbert. And I don't know. I haven't seen the list. I assume the next time we vote on judges, he'll be there. I don't know.
That judge put together a 21-page report in 3 hours. I don't know if you guys remember college or high school where you had to write a paper, It's
pretty impressive.
Usually 3 hours. That is very impressive.
So
Must have
Bob
been a lot
Lewis,
of plagiarism.
Elbert County, and I want to thank Rhonda and you and your team for the great job you've done through some trying times. You guys held it together. And you've done a good job. You've done what you're supposed to do. My question is, I'm going to ask you to kind of recount some of the experiences. You had a should have been a civil disagreement in a legal arena with the Secretary of State. So you had your authority, she has hers. You had you didn't agree, and you used the proper systems to come to a solution. It's not the solution I sense that you two wanted, but it's a solution that's legal and binding. But you had some adventures involving the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which to me, apparently they stalked you guys, and I want your comments and experiences on it. I don't know why the FBI was involved in that. They have, this was not, you didn't rob a bank. To my knowledge, you didn't sell any top secret information to one of our opponents. You didn't kidnap anybody. So why were they involved? Was that ever explained to you? And just kind of fill us all in on what you experienced there. Wow. Thank you.
So yes, last spring, we really haven't publicized this a whole lot. On a Saturday morning, and just by providence, both Rhonda and I, neither one of us were at home when this happened. But Rhonda called me and said, I just got a call from the FBI that they're at my door. What do I do? Then, well, don't go home. I said, well, hang tight. And so I got on the phone call, got a hold of some people. And in the meantime, knew they were heading to my house, and so let them know, don't answer the door. That's what we're going to do. We're just going to say no. And within a matter of hours, we had, well, it was even maybe an hour. We had legal protection, and those FBI agents had been called by the attorney and said, if you have any more things to do with Dallas or Rhonda, you have to do it through us. And that's the last that we've heard about any of that. So what that was about, I don't know, but that's where it was.
Greg Lopez, Elbert County. Question on the risk limited audit. By the way, I did attend the meeting this afternoon with the Secretary of State's bipartisan advisory election. Yeah, you know, I did give him a letter, so we'll see. But I also had an opportunity to speak with Philip B. Stark, the statistician out of Berkeley, about the risk limited audit. And am I correct in my understanding that when we do the risk limited audit here in Colorado, we are basically matching the images of the ballots themselves, but we're not really sure as to how the machine actually allocated those votes to the candidates?
That's a very technical question, so I'll try to answer that. Yes, when we do the RLA, we are comparing the ballot image to what the cast vote record shows and verifying that was where it was. The paper image. So yes, it's there. Depends on how much questions you have about the system, on how accurate that is. But that's what we do right now with the risk limit audit. It's interesting that you mentioned Mr. Stark, the one who kind of started the whole idea of the risk limit. He's now back totally away from it and said it doesn't do what I thought it was going to do.
All right, this will be your last question.
Joe Pepper, third generation native of Colorado. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for your courage. We applaud you for it. My question is this gold standard that's being propagated from the Capitol versus the gold standard which you've created. How do we get more people in your position to do what you did?
Well, I guess you have to find out what they believe when you get ready to elect them. That's an important thing to have. People, I get the questions a lot. Why did more clerks not step forward? Why did more clerks not want to put themselves out there? One of them is, you see what's happened in Mesa, you see what's happened to us, and a lot of clerks don't want to have any part of that. And so it's just easier to go along, get along, and not have it there. I don't blame them for that. They certainly have that choice for it. And for a lot of these clerks across the state, they don't have term limits like we do here in Elbert. And some of these clerks have been clerks for 10, 20, 30 years. And I think psychologically, it's really tough if you've been involved that long and you've poured your heart and soul into elections for that long. It's pretty hard to take a critical eye and say there's a problem here. And that's a hard pill for elections officials to swallow. And that really is tough.
The other thing I would add to that, just as a citizen, is they do not remember that they were chosen for such a time as this, just like the rest of us. Okay.
Tom Peterson, Elizabeth area. Tying into Joe's comment, you made a very strong closing statement. If you could foreshadow the response or what lies ahead, any thoughts, Dallas, as we move forward from here?
Well, we're going public. We put the press release out. Dee's done a great job working with the press. We've already had a couple requests for interviews, and so we're going to keep pushing this and challenging her, make her respond. You know, why are you keeping this secret? It doesn't mean that we need to expose the code to everybody in the world, but we need to have people who are able to get in there and evaluate and make sure that it is what it claims to be. Part of the lawsuit that I was involved with in November was a rule that she made, and this is going to get ramped back up because we just filed another paper this week on it. was her prohibition on outside audits. She calls them fraudits, okay? Tweeted out, she called them a fraudit. And totally blocking any chance to go in there. And so part of what I want to do is start having this public discourse that we need to be able to verify. What other business, what other industry are you aware of that has an audit, and what they do is they do it themselves and say, you know what, everything was good. But in elections, that's kind of what we do, right? People come in and we verify it. We do all the steps, everything that we're supposed to do. But, you know, Rhonda sits down and says, we got this many ballots, and this, and this, and this, and this happened, and they are all balanced. Okay. But as far as knowing anything other than we balanced the number of ballots, it's not part of what we're doing. So we need to have that opportunity. And I'm not saying it needs to happen every election, but we need to have that opportunity. At least the clerks need to have the option that if they want to have an outside firm that's certified and knows what they're doing, come in and verify what we're doing. Well, I think the citizens would love that. We actually have another company that's in Colorado, up in Wheat Ridge, SLI Compliance. I mentioned it earlier in the slide. And part of their pamphlet that they put out is that that's what they do. They go into places and do forensic audits. So we have a company right here in Colorado who can do it. And Jenna has said, no, it's against the rules. You cannot have an outside audit. And so we just need to be aware and keep people aware of what's going on and letting them know.
All right, one more question.
My name is Adriana Cuva. I was the canvasser for El Paso County. I did not certify El Paso County. As a judge there, I saw lots of discrepancies there. I did write a minority report on it, and there are a lot of other legal avenues that they're going to be taking, including possibly myself. I wanted to commend you because there are, my husband's in the service, and this is a country that we need to stand up for. I was not born in this country, but I love this country tremendously. And I commend you for your courage to stand up, even though it's hard to speak truth sometimes, but I think the Lord tells us to be truthful and courageous because he's always with us. So if there's anything else that you might need, I put out the minority report for El Paso, and there's just, I think what really stood out to me was, I don't know if you used the Agilis machine.
We do not.
Okay. I have a lot of questions with the Agilis machine, cleaning up the voter rolls, and there's just, I think, 7 or 8 things that I wrote on there. But thank you so much for your courage.
Thank you for coming tonight.
Beautiful.
I just want to say thank you so much for coming. It means a lot to me to know that we're not in this alone, that you guys, you've had our backs the whole time. And even when you didn't know all the information that you do like you do now, you still had our backs. You had your confidence in us that we were doing the right thing. And it really, it's hard to describe how it keeps you going when you get that type of response. And so I just really want to say thank you. Thank you for coming out tonight. Stay tuned. There's more stuff that's going to be coming. We're in this for the long haul, or at least for the next 8 months, 6 months while I'm still clerk. So we'll keep at it, and we'll try and get done everything that we can. But thank you for your support. I really, really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done. Hi.
I'm Maggie Witherby with Elbert County Stands Up.